This is one you know back to another video. Elon Musk. Elon Musk.
Steps on the moon, as Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin etched their names into history. But despite this monumental achievement, NASA's plans to return to the lunar surface remained on hold. From budget cuts to shifting priorities, the journey back was never fully realized. What caused NASA to leave the moon behind after such a groundbreaking mission? And now Elon Musk has stated, "I will show you why NASA has never returned to the moon." So let's get right into it.
Right, right. We'll see that. We'll see.
The Apollo program.
You can see the stars and stripes on the lunar surface. Beautiful, just beautiful.
The Apollo program is one of the most significant achievements in human history, not only for its technological feats, but also for the incredible steps taken in human exploration. While Apollo 11 often takes center stage due to its historic landing on the moon, the story of the Apollo program is much broader. It was a decades-long effort that began in the early 1960s, involving numerous missions, groundbreaking technology, and a determined focus on advancing humanity's capabilities in space. The foundation of the Apollo program was laid in the early years of space exploration, under the direction of NASA, which had been formed in response to the Soviet Union's early successes in space. Before any astronaut could land on the moon, the program faced a major setback. Apollo 1 was slated to be the first crewed mission of the Apollo program. The mission was to test the spacecraft's systems in low Earth orbit, but it never got off the ground. On January 27, 1967, the crew of 3, Gus Grissom, Ed White, and Roger B. Chaffee, were conducting a pre-launch test when a fire broke out in the pure oxygen
That's
environment inside the spacecraft. Despite the best efforts of the crew, all 3 astronauts tragically lost their lives, and the mission was immediately scrubbed. After the Apollo 1
a real damn job. Real damn job.
disaster, NASA went to great lengths to address the issues that had contributed to the tragedy. This involved a redesign of the Apollo command module and more thorough testing of both the spacecraft and its equipment. The crew's sacrifice set the tone for the perseverance that would follow in later Apollo missions.
Yeah. Give it time.
It wasn't until October 1968, nearly 2 years after the tragedy of Apollo 1, that the program saw its first success. Apollo 7 was the first crewed flight in the Apollo program, and it was a crucial step in the testing and development of the spacecraft systems that would eventually take astronauts to the moon. The mission was a success in terms of its objectives. Apollo 7 tested the Apollo command module in low Earth orbit, ensuring that the spacecraft's life support systems, guidance, and navigation worked as expected. The crew spent 11 days in orbit, and despite some technical difficulties,
I see most people ain't really hooked on stuff like this. Oh, it's still stuck in the box.
The mission confirmed the spacecraft was ready for future crewed missions.
You gonna learn today. You gonna learn today.
This marked the first time that humans had flown in an Apollo spacecraft, and it gave NASA the green light to move forward. Apollo 8 made history by becoming the first mission to send astronauts around the moon. This mission wasn't originally part of the Apollo program's plan. NASA had initially intended to have the first manned lunar landing occur.
How many people want to be an astronaut?
On Apollo 10. However, after the success of Apollo 7 and with time running out, the decision was made to send a crew on a test flight around the moon. Their mission was to verify that the spacecraft could travel to the moon, perform a lunar orbit, and return to Earth safely. On December 21, 1968, the spacecraft was launched on a trajectory to the moon. Upon reaching lunar orbit, the crew made a series of burns to adjust their trajectory and successfully entered a stable orbit around the moon. This mission is especially significant because it marked the first time humans moon and witnessed the view of Earth rising above the lunar horizon. After 10 orbits of the moon, Apollo 8 returned safely to Earth on December 27, 1968. Apollo 9 was the first mission to test the lunar module, which would be used to land astronauts on the moon. The lunar module was a crucial piece of the puzzle, and Apollo 9 provided the first opportunity to test its performance in Earth's orbit. The module had to be tested in conditions that simulated a lunar landing, and this mission confirmed that it could separate from the command module, maneuver in space, and return safely. Apollo 10 was essentially a dress rehearsal for Apollo 11. While the mission did not land on the moon, it was the first mission to send astronauts to the moon's vicinity and test the entire lunar landing sequence except for the actual landing itself. Apollo 10's success paved the way for the historic landing of Apollo 11, the one that actually landed on the moon. More on that and why NASA never returned to the moon later. After the success of Apollo 11, several more crewed missions were sent to the moon, focused on lunar exploration, which contributed to a deeper understanding of the moon's geology and environment. Apollo 17, launched in December 1972,
How's the TV working? Beautiful. To coin a phrase, it's a panoramic scene of beauty. Oh, come on now, Bob. Say, Bob, what
of the moon's geology and environment. Apollo 17, launched in December 1972,
how's the TV working? Beautiful. To coin a phrase, it's a panoramic scene of beauty. Oh, come on now, Bob. Say, Bob, what do you think of the terrain?
was the last mission of the Apollo program. It was the sixth and final crewed mission to the moon, and it marked the end of the program. The crew spent 3 days on the lunar surface, exploring the Taurus-Littrow Valley, collecting samples, and conducting scientific experiments. Apollo 17 remains the final time humans have traveled beyond Earth's orbit. The mission provided the most extensive set of lunar samples ever collected, and it marked the end of an era of human exploration of the moon, the Cold War moon race. The Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union, lasting from the end of World War II until the early 1990s, was marked by intense rivalry, not just in political ideologies and military power, but in nearly every aspect of global influence. Among the most fascinating arenas of this competition was the space race, which pitted the US and the USSR against each other in a technological and scientific contest that would define much of
Contest. I usually work together.
and scientific contest that would define much of the mid-20th century. The origins of the space race are tied to the broader context of the Cold War, where the United States and the Soviet Union were locked in a geopolitical struggle.
Listen to this.
When you feel like the war about him going to the military,
The space race, which pitted the US and the USSR against each other in a technological and scientific contest that would define much of the mid-20th century. The origins of the space race are tied to the broader context of the Cold War, where the United States and the Soviet Union were locked in a geopolitical struggle. Each side sought to prove its superiority militarily, economically, and ideologically. The competition to achieve dominance in space was not just about technological innovation, it was a way for both to assert their political and ideological systems as superior. The US championed capitalism and democracy, while the USSR promoted communism and a state-controlled economy. The race to space became an extension of this ideological battle, with both nations eager to demonstrate that their way of life could produce greater achievements. It all started with the launch of Sputnik, won by the Soviet Union on October 4, 1957. Sputnik was the world's first artificial satellite, and its successful launch was a shock to the United States. It demonstrated that the Soviet Union had developed the ability to send a man-made object in space. It demonstrated
not the first satellite.
that the Soviet Union had developed the ability to send a man-made object into orbit around the Earth, and it raised serious concerns about the technological and military capabilities of the USSR. The implications were vast. If the Soviet Union could send a satellite into space, could they also develop the capability to launch nuclear missiles from space? The launch of Sputnik spurred the US government
That's the first thing you think about. And violence. That ain't about him. All about violence.
military capabilities of the USSR. The implications were vast. If the Soviet Union could send a satellite into space, could they also develop the capability to launch nuclear missiles from space? The launch of Sputnik spurred the US government into action.
I thought there was a spaceship and space car.
President Eisenhower, worried about the technological gap between the two superpowers, recognized the need to invest more heavily in science and technology. The creation of NASA in 1958 was a direct response to Sputnik. However, the US was not only concerned with closing the technological gap, but also with the implications of Soviet success in space. The fear of falling behind in a race that could directly impact national security especially with the potential for space-based weapons, was a significant driving force behind the US efforts. While the US focused on developing its space program, NASA in 1958 was a direct response to Sputnik. However, the US was not only concerned with closing the technological gap, but also with the implications of Soviet success in space. The fear of falling behind in a race that could directly impact national security, especially with the potential for space-based weapons, was a significant driving force behind the US efforts. While the US focused on developing its space program,
If a man really hated ads, here's what he would do. Day 1.
security, especially with the potential for space-based weapons, was a significant driving force behind the US efforts. While the US focused on developing its space program to keep up with the Soviets, the USSR continued to push forward with its own space endeavors. The Soviet Union had a strong scientific and engineering community, and it made rapid advancements in space exploration, culminating in Yuri Gagarin's historic flight on April 12, 1961. Yuri became the first human to orbit the Earth, and his achievement was a major victory for the Soviet space program. In the years that followed, the space race would become one of the defining features of the Cold War. Both poured significant resources into their space programs with the goal of achieving world dominance. But while the space race itself was the most visible and iconic competition, it was by no means the only arena in which the US and the USSR clashed. In terms of military competition, the Cold War was marked by the arms race. Both the US and the Soviet Union built up vast stockpiles of nuclear weapons, each side striving to have the upper hand in terms of firepower. This race for nuclear superiority was accompanied by a struggle for influence in the world. The US and the Soviet Union supported opposing factions in various conflicts, including the Korean War and the Vietnam War, as each side sought to spread its own political system and gain allies. The space race, however, offered a different kind of competition. It was not just about military power, but about the ability to conquer the unknown, to push the boundaries of human knowledge and capability. Both nations realized that space exploration was a way to demonstrate technological prowess and leadership. Achievements in space would be seen as a symbol of technological superiority and a way to prove that their political systems could lead to progress and success. The Soviets initially held the advantage in space exploration, but the US made significant strides as well, particularly after the establishment of NASA. The US focused on improving its own space capabilities, building the technology for lunar exploration, and working toward the ultimate goal of landing a man on the moon. But was this competition the only thing that fueled lunar exploration? Why didn't they return to the Earth's only satellite?
Looking at the button. It's about.
To understand this, we need to delve deeper into the legendary Apollo 11. Apollo 11, America won the race. Apollo 11 stands as one of the most remarkable achievements in human history, not just in space exploration, but in human ambition and technological prowess. Apollo 11 was not just a technical feat, it was also a symbol of the power of human determination and the culmination of a decade of intense scientific and engineering work. The mission was launched atop a Saturn V rocket.
3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes past the hour. Liftoff on Apollo 11.
The largest and most powerful rocket ever built, designed to carry astronauts into lunar orbit. This behemoth, at 363 feet tall and weighing 6.2 million pounds, was capable of sending astronauts Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins on their way. The crew of Apollo 11 was led by Neil Armstrong. Buzz Aldrin was assigned to walk on the lunar surface alongside him, while Michael Collins, the third member of the team, stayed in lunar orbit aboard the command module.
So that's the first time I've been never that. Well, let me too.
Awaiting the safe return of his companions. They were carefully selected for their skills and experiences, each contributing to
So that time. So that was my time. Like that.
to accomplish the monument was led by Neil Armstrong. Buzz Aldrin was assigned to walk on the lunar surface alongside him, while Michael Collins, the third member of the team, stayed in lunar orbit aboard the command module, awaiting the safe return of his companions. They were carefully selected for their skills and experiences, each contributing to the team's ability to accomplish the monumental task ahead. The journey to the moon itself took 4 days. As the spacecraft traveled through space, the crew used their time to recheck their equipment, systems, and plans for the landing. Once Apollo 11 reached the vicinity of the moon, the spacecraft entered lunar orbit. At this point, the command module, where Michael was stationed, remained in orbit around the moon, while Neil and Buzz transferred to the lunar module named Eagle. Their task was to land on the moon's surface, explore for a few hours, collect samples, and then return to the command module before heading back to Earth. They separated from Michael and began their descent to the surface, a process
How long did this take to land on the moon?
that would take several hours. The lunar module was equipped with a guidance system, but the descent was anything but automatic. Buzz had to manually control the craft to avoid boulders and craters, navigating their way to a flat, safe area to land. As they neared the moon's surface, Neil encountered several unexpected challenges. The lunar module's automated landing system had identified a site near the Sea of Tranquility, but he realized that it was filled with large, hazardous rocks. In a split-second decision, he took manual control of the module and guided it to a smoother patch of land. Once on the moon's surface, they prepared to leave the lunar module. Neil Armstrong was the first to step out, descending the ladder and making history with his famous statement, "That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." These words, broadcast live to millions of people across the globe, captured the awe and wonder of what humanity had just achieved. Buzz followed shortly after, and together, the two astronauts spent over 2 hours on the lunar surface. The success of Apollo 11 was not and wonder of what humanity had just achieved. Buzz followed shortly after, and together, the two astronauts spent over 2 hours on the lunar surface.
I didn't have fun. I think you had fun on the moon, though. That's really nice. Sight. You see the Earth for the moon.
The success of Apollo 11 was not only a scientific and technological achievement, but
I know, I'm just getting my opinion.
it was also a political victory in the context of the Cold War. By landing on the moon, the United States had fulfilled President John F. Kennedy's challenge to put a man on the moon by the end of the 1960s. It was a clear victory for the U.S. in the space race.
We were going to the system the first time they landed on the moon. I thought it was the 2000s.
Recently, Elon Musk has revealed why NASA has never returned to the moon in the last 50 years. Elon Musk's space infatuation. Elon Musk's deep infatuation with space has been clear for years, and his unwavering focus on Mars has captivated both the tech and space communities.
That's what we want.
Elon's drive to explore the red planet and eventually colonize it isn't just a passing interest, it's the core. His vision for the future of humanity. But why Mars? Why not the Moon, Venus, or even other destinations in space? Elon Musk has repeatedly made the case that humanity's future relies on becoming a multi-planetary species. At the core of his reasoning is the belief that Earth is fragile. He often points to natural disasters, climate change, and the potential for human-made catastrophes as existential threats that could wipe out civilization. Elon's thinking is that to ensure humanity's survival, Elon Musk has repeatedly made the case that humanity's future relies on becoming a multi-planetary species. At the core of his reasoning is
You mean by that?
At the core of his reasoning is the belief that Earth is fragile. He often points to natural disasters, climate change, and the potential for human-made catastrophes as existential threats that could wipe out civilization. Elon's thinking is that to ensure humanity's survival, we must not put all our eggs in one basket. The more planets we inhabit, the more resilient.
That's a true song, too. It's a true song. Right back, yeah.
Made catastrophes as existential threats that could wipe out civilization. Elon's thinking is that to ensure humanity's survival, we must not put all our eggs in one basket. The more planets we inhabit, the more resilient our species becomes. For him, Mars stands out as the ideal candidate for human colonization. It's not just because it's the closest planet to Earth with the potential for human habitation, but because of its unique challenges and its potential for long-term sustainability. Elon has compared the
Who's going to study the moon? He can do Mars. I don't know. Be more in the
idea of making life multi-planetary to creating a backup system for civilization.
This long is more than one Earth, though. It's like probably like 5, no more than 7 other Earth. Like this one. Not exactly like this one,
With SpaceX, he envisions a future where people aren't just sending rovers to Mars to take soil samples, but are building thriving colonies. In his mind, the moon, while interesting, simply doesn't offer the same possibilities. The moon lacks many of the natural resources that Elon believes are essential for building a self-sustaining colony. There's no atmosphere, making it harder to develop technologies for habitation. Elon has spoken on numerous occasions about the challenges of sustaining human life on the moon.
The moon is close, but it doesn't have an atmosphere. The gravity is only 1/6 that of Earth, and it's missing a lot of key resources.
Particularly because the moon is a barren, inhospitable.
If you've been in a
numerous occasions about the challenges of sustaining human life on the moon.
The moon is close, but it doesn't have an atmosphere. The gravity is only 1/6 that of Earth, and it's missing a lot of key resources.
Particularly because the moon is a barren, inhospitable rock without the resources that could support.
I want to get my opinion.
Support long-term settlements. But these are reasons why Elon doesn't believe the moon could be our next. There's no atmosphere, making it harder to develop technologies for habitation. Elon has spoken on numerous occasions about the challenges of sustaining human life on the moon.
The moon is close, but it doesn't have an atmosphere. The gravity is only 1/6 that of Earth, and it's missing a lot of key resources.
I heard that now.
Particularly because the moon is a barren, inhospitable rock without the resources that could support long-term settlements. But these are reasons why Elon doesn't believe the moon could be our next home, not why NASA has abandoned the Apollo program. Mars is Elon's clear target because of its potential to support human life in ways other planets cannot. He has stated that Mars is the only planet in our solar system besides Earth where humanity could build a self-sustaining civilization. It has a 24-hour day cycle, which closely resembles Earth's, and it's cold, but not too cold.
I think they would never talk about Mars like that. Like they talk about the moon. Yeah.
Mars also has water ice beneath its surface, a critical resource for sustaining human life. Water is necessary for drinking, but also for growing food and producing oxygen. Elon has been vocal about the importance of water as a key resource in space exploration. While the moon has some water ice in permanently shadowed craters at its poles, the quantity and accessibility are far less favorable than what's found on Mars. Moreover, Mars has a gravity that is roughly 38% of Earth's, which is enough to help mitigate the severe health problems that come with extended exposure to microgravity on the moon or in space. One of the driving forces behind Musk's vision for Mars is SpaceX, whose primary goal is to reduce the cost of space travel, which Elon sees as the key to making Mars colonization feasible. By developing reusable rockets with the Falcon 9 and the Starship program, he hopes to drastically lower the cost of launching payloads to space, making it possible to send thousands of people to Mars.
What else is out there? You might go. Would y'all know?
Mars to be a self-sustaining civilization as quickly as possible. And I think this can be done in around 20 years.
The development of Starship, a fully reusable spacecraft designed for deep space travel, is central to this vision.
If they go on 3 different planets, they ain't never seen no other people or no other spaceships. They've seen all many different planets that they go to. And what I hope you done that too.
Elon has been clear about his long-term goal for SpaceX. Starship is designed to be capable of carrying up to 100 passengers, along with the necessary supplies to help them survive on Mars for extended periods. Elon's obsession with Mars can also be traced to his personal philosophy. He's driven by a desire to make a meaningful impact on the future of humanity. He has often discussed how important it is for humanity to pursue ambitious goals in order to give people something to aspire to. He sees space exploration as a unifying cause, something that can connect people around the world to work together toward a common goal. Elon Musk revelation.
And we start doing that, man. We're gonna do it. Complete the goal. You know?
Humanity. He has often discussed how important it is for humanity to pursue ambitious goals in order to give people something to aspire to. He sees space exploration as a unifying cause, something that can connect people around the world to work together toward a common goal. Elon Musk revelation.
And that's a big step, too. It's definitely moving to a whole nother state. A whole nother good.
The United States landed on the moon 6 times between 1969 and 1972.
Yeah, so they all ran on the moon one time and then never went back. So now they ran on the moon 6 times.
With Apollo missions bringing back hundreds of pounds of lunar rock and soil samples.
I never join a meeting.
And making history by sending astronauts into space and onto the lunar surface. But after Apollo 17, NASA's last lunar landing, the US seemed to pull back from the moon. Despite the groundbreaking success of the Apollo program,
Why they pull back?
by sending astronauts into space and onto the lunar surface. But after Apollo 17, NASA's last lunar landing, the US seemed to pull back from the moon. Despite the groundbreaking success of the Apollo program, the United States did not send astronauts back to the moon.
Wow.
One key reason they listed for halting the lunar missions was the immense cost. At its peak, the Apollo program missions was the immense cost. At its peak, the Apollo program consumed roughly $25 billion, equivalent to over $150 billion today. The public's enthusiasm for space exploration also began to wane. The excitement of landing on the moon was largely captured in the first few missions, but by the time Apollo 17 landed on the moon in 1972, the novelty had worn off. There were also other pressing issues facing the US at the time, particularly the Vietnam War and the growing economic
Oh, was they fighting in
also began to wane. The excitement of landing on the moon was largely captured in the first few missions, But by the time Apollo 17 landed on the moon in 1972, the novelty had worn off. There were also other pressing issues facing the US at the time, particularly the Vietnam War and the growing economic concerns back home. As a result, public support for space exploration, especially lunar missions, began to decline. Beyond the immediate financial concerns, the political landscape in the US also shifted significantly after Apollo 17.
17 to us, to the crew, is probably best summed up in the meaning of our patch as we designed it and as the ideas that we put into it.
The Apollo program was, in many ways, a product of the Cold War competition with the Soviet Union. The US had put a man on the moon to demonstrate technological superiority during the space race, which was part of a broader struggle for global influence. Once that objective was achieved, the political will to continue funding the Apollo missions diminished. But all of this wasn't quite true, and one person decided it was time to expose it. Elon Musk shocked.
Wish you had a professional business address and phone number.
Yeah, you've been like crazy.
During the space race, which was part of a broader struggle for global influence. Once that objective was achieved, the political will to continue funding the Apollo missions diminished. But all of this wasn't quite true, and one person decided it was time to expose it. Elon Musk shocked the world when he declared, "I will show you why NASA has never returned to the moon." According to Elon, they lied, and the truth lies in the gaps of the Apollo mission's story. He claims there's evidence suggesting NASA might have discovered something on the moon they weren't ready to confront. Something that...
See? What was it? Already. That time, well, no. Second time.
NASA might have discovered something on the moon they weren't ready to confront. Something that changed the course of space exploration forever.
What was it?
Elon theorized that it wasn't just about shifting public opinion or reallocating resources. He hinted at classified data from the Apollo missions that was never made public, raising questions about what NASA might have found on the moon's far side. Could it be alien structures, untapped resources, or something more ominous? Elon, with his bold ventures into space, promised to uncover the real reasons, insisting, if there's a truth to be told, we owe it to humanity to find out. This isn't just speculation. Elon has reportedly directed SpaceX to prepare missions specifically aimed at the moon, not just to land humans there again, but to investigate these unanswered questions.
What did they see on the moon? I got home and test. What did they see? What data was it?
We can't explore Mars fully until we understand what NASA left behind, or why they never went back, he said. With SpaceX's advanced Starship program, Elon believes we're closer than ever to uncovering the moon's secrets. Whether it's a game-changing discovery...
You know the song today. They talking about that insufficient fund. But y'all went there 6 times already. Oh, sorry.
Or just a forgotten piece of history, Elon's quest has reignited the debate. Why hasn't NASA returned to the moon? And more importantly, what could they be hiding? Also, let's not forget about the discoveries that have shown that the moon is more dynamic than previously presented. Scientists have found evidence of water and ice at the lunar poles, hidden within permanently shadowed craters. This discovery could have vast implications.
I would be here.
The discoveries that have shown that the moon is more dynamic than previously presented. Scientists have found evidence of water and ice at the lunar poles, hidden within permanently shadowed craters. This discovery could have vast implications. Water is essential for human life, and if it can be extracted from the moon, it could fuel lunar bases, be used for drinking, and even be converted into oxygen for breathing or hydrogen for rocket fuel. These resources could enable sustained human presence on the moon, potentially turning the lunar surface into a platform for further exploration of the solar system, a celestial body much closer than Mars. Furthermore, evidence suggests that the moon is not as dead as once thought. Seismic activity has been detected, and these tremors hint at internal dynamics beneath the surface. It's possible that there are still untold geological processes happening on the moon, and that its interior could harbor crucial scientific secrets. Another interesting find has been the discovery of rare geological formations on the moon's surface. Scientists have uncovered signs of ancient volcanic activity, as well as strange rock formations that may indicate the presence of materials not found elsewhere in the solar system. These findings could have immense scientific value, and understanding them could unlock new knowledge about the formation of planetary bodies and potentially human settlements on the moon.
High desert of the United States. It's different, but it's very pretty out here.
So, could it be true that NASA never returned to the moon because of what they found, or what they couldn't explain? Elon's revelations leave us with more questions than answers, but one thing is clear: he's determined to uncover the truth.
Yeah, they was still like asking what you see in the moon. I was saying, I want to know. You that's why you tell them to do the story, you know, and tell what happened. Yeah. Not saying this is fun, but, if the animals really get you back in another.